Did you guys see this insane smash and grab at a jewelry store in Seattle? The SPD blotter, police investigating $2 million smash and grab robbery of a jewelry store. And you see these young, oh my gosh, can you imagine being that employee? He's just like, okay, I'm backing away. This is at Menashe & Sons in West Seattle. The thieves came in. If you're watching the video, a bunch of, you can tell they're just young kids, smashing all the glass. They took watches, jewelry, and they were in and out. Clearly organized retail theft. Nothing the business owner could do. Nearly $2 million in a matter of minutes. And police are still investigating it, trying to figure out who the hell did it. But that sort of ties into a discussion I want to have today about youth crime. This segment is brought to you in partnership with our friends at Future 42. Turn your frustration into action at future42.org. Make sure you sign up for their newsletter to be alerted to opportunities to do just that. And look, I don't know the exact ages of the youth who did the smash and grab robbery, but I can tell just by looking at them that they're pretty young. And we know that this has been a substantial problem. And it's only getting worse because Democrats have been of this mindset that, oh, you know, kids, you can't hold them accountable. Their brains aren't fully developed. They're developed enough to make significant decisions around their own medical care. But, oh, if they hurt someone, rob someone, kill someone, well, their brains aren't fully developed. So we just need to take it easy on them. And before we dive into this, I'm not of the belief that we should treat children in all instances like adults when it comes to the criminal justice system. Now, there are some kids who they've been through the ringer, they've committed enough crimes, they committed a heinous enough crime where absolutely you treat them like an adult, but the goal should be to correct their path in life. And not to say, you know, on the very first go around, absolutely throw the book at them, but you need to make sure that there's some sort of support for these youth, that you can get to the bottom of why they're resorting to a life of crime so early. But our state has really taken things, as it often does on a criminal justice front, to the extremes. And the result has been that we are seeing this astronomical surge in youth violence, not only in Washington state, but elsewhere across the country. So this is from the Seattle Times. And as always, the Seattle Times is just going to piss me off in the way that they cover things. But the headline, some good news on gun violence, but not when it comes to teens. So it says, you know, they claim that there's been a decrease in crime overall, although I would argue, as I often do, that you have a lot of crimes that aren't being reported. But they said still, even with the decrease, more needs to be done to change the trajectory when it comes to the overall use of guns and gun violence among teenagers. Since 2022, the number of guns confiscated by police just in Seattle has increased year over year. I mean, it's increased substantially. I won't read you the boring numbers. In addition, there has been a steady increase in the number of shootings, fatal and non-fatal, of people 17 and younger since 2022. In 2023, 9% of the shooting victims were 17 and younger. In 2024, 15% were in that age group. So we've seen just year over year a significant increase in the number of shooting victims who are under the age of 17. And as you know, in the gang life, today's shooter is tomorrow's victim. In the first quarter of this year, 11.6% of shooting victims were 17 and younger. In the second quarter, 16% of shooting victims were 17 and younger. Such incidents often lead to retaliation, many times with guns. So the Seattle Times lays this out. And this is a problem that for any of us who pay attention to the news, we know exists. I mean, we see the stories of the very young kids who are involved in these gangs, who are shooting each other, who are getting shot in return, retaliation. It's very, very clear. There's been this real emboldening of youth to go out and commit crimes for reasons that I'll discuss in a moment. What really makes me angry about the media in general is they always complain about things or cover things when it's reached crisis levels. And even this past legislative session, there were things happening in Olympia that's only goal seemed to be taking it easy on young criminals. And now we're surprised that young criminals are out there committing crimes at record rates. So it's like the media fails to see in the moment what politicians are doing and then talk about what the potential consequences might be. Like the media doesn't think that's their job. It's like, no, if we reduce punishments for young people, if we, allow them leniency, above and beyond what we have in previous years, we're going to see that manifest, right? So the Seattle Times goes on to say, meanwhile, the state legislature this year stood in the way of progress when it comes to youth gun violence. Lisa Mannion, the King County prosecutor, tried to persuade lawmakers to change the law that allows juveniles to have 5 firearm convictions before they can be held for longer than 30 days in a state juvenile rehabilitation program. The first 4 gun convictions are limited to a maximum of 30 days in a local juvenile facility. The bill, sponsored by a Democrat, Representative David Hackney, would have reduced the requirement to 3 convictions for juveniles to be held in a state program, but the bill died an early death. And the thing that bothers me about this is, where was the Seattle Times and so many other news organizations during the session talking about the consequence of not passing a bill like that? And there were other bills that we talked about on the show at length. One of them would have reduced sentencing enhancements specifically for gang members who use firearms. And there was a sentencing enhancement that had to do with older gang members who recruit younger gang members to commit a felony basically on their behalf. And that's what happens a lot, right? These older gang members, they know how it works. They know if you're under the age of 18 and you commit a crime in the state of Washington, you're going to get a slap on the wrist. So let's say they want a strong-armed robbery done. Well, the older gang members order the younger gang members to do it. Now, in the state of Washington, there is a sentencing enhancement for doing that. Because at some point, Democrats were saying and said, hey, we need to throw the book at these older gang members who are recruiting younger gang members to commit crimes for them. So there was a sentencing enhancement. Well, what did one of the Democratic-backed bills this session do? It looked to get rid of that sentencing enhancement. So it's basically them saying, oh, go ahead, older gang members, and recruit younger gang members to commit crimes for you. That's the mindset of Democrats in Olympia. And then they turn around and complain about gun violence. And they blame the gun, of course. They don't blame the criminals or their own policies or anything like that. And then when they talk about gun violence, which is gang violence, or when they talk about gun violence overall, shootings, etc., what do they always focus on? Oh, school shootings. They'll focus on whatever shootings involve like white suspects. And they won't because it's racist or whatever. They don't want to talk about what accounts for the vast majority of shootings, and that's gang violence, particularly involving youth of color. And because it's like an issue related to race, they ignore one of the key drivers of gun violence, which is gangs, and they focus on all these other things like, hey, let's ban assault weapons, weapons of war, which also account for a minuscule percentage of the shootings that we're seeing happen in Washington state. Most of it is done with handguns, and most of those are stolen from someone or they're cobbled together. And so they regulate law-abiding gun owners, restrict the scary type weapons that aren't even being used in the vast majority of shootings. And they say they did something and they're tackling gun violence, and then they ignore where the real gun violence is coming from and who's perpetrating it and who's the victim of it, all in all for the sake of, radical ideology. So if they wanted to actually solve quote unquote gun violence, then they would take a harder line with the gangs. They would stop coddling child criminals who are involved in the gang life. And they would admit where the real problem lies, but they simply won't do it. And then the media will just say, oh, the legislature didn't do its job this session. Okay, well, you should have held them accountable for not doing their job this session. As opposed to now, months later, complaining about the fact that they didn't pass these laws that would have prevented this spike in youth violence that we're seeing. It's all just outrageous. That segment was brought to you in partnership with our friends at Future 42. Turn your frustration into action at future42.org. Make sure you sign up for their newsletter to be alerted to opportunities to do just that.